Welcome to UnityNow, the podcast where we discuss unity in the face of division. Inspired by the Unity 2020 plan, we strive to unite Americans by highlighting the middle ground between the two dominant parties and promoting the individual over groups. Each episode, we will bring you exciting, well-informed guests and host nuanced conversations about politically charged subjects. Our goal is to bring an end to the ideological war threatening the collective well-being of this great country.
Okay. Welcome to UnityNow podcast. I'm your host, Kimberly Kolb Eakin, and here today with me, special guest, Brittany King. Hi, Brittany.
Hello, how are you?
Great. So excited for you to be on. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit to our audience? Let them know what you're up to and what projects you're working on.
I'm sure. Yeah, thank you for having me again. My name is Brittany King. I am from the Midwest. I am from Indiana. I am a writer, journalist. I taught writing at Indiana University last semester in 2021. Right now, I am an editor for a publication in Nashville that will be launching this fall, so I'm really excited about that. And I love to explore different topics. I have a YouTube channel as well called American Shade with Brittany King. There, I do my own critical takes, or I will interview interesting people and get their diverse perspectives on various topics.
Thank you. So what compelled you to become a writer?
That is a loaded question, and I'll try to answer. I don't know if I set out to be a writer. I know when I was young, I was drawn to imagination and really was someone that loved creativity. And writing just seemed to be a place that I could, one, be creative, and two, it was like this solace of where I could kind of express myself. I was really a shy kid. I was a reserved child, but I always had like an opinion about things. I might not say it out loud, but if someone asked me certain things that I really truly believed, I had no problem like sticking up and expressing it. But writing was a space where I completely could be myself. And then as time went on, when I realized that people do this for a living, even though in my community, there were many writers, journalists. We had one newspaper, so this wasn't something that was normal in our community. But I really had a passion for this, and then I went to Indiana University, and I actually majored in something totally different, like media, because I was still too afraid to take the plunge to be a writer. But after I did a couple of literature courses and writing courses, those teachers came up to me and told me, you need to write. You need to even take literature classes because you have an analytical eye that I haven't really seen. Like you're telling me your analysis on like Tale of Two Cities, and now I'm looking at it in a different way. And so I just took that risk, and it was one of the best decisions I've made in my life of 33 years. And then I went on to NYU and got my master's in journalism, and professionally I've been writing probably for a long time, like over a decade. And then things kind of just circled back where I was teaching at the place that kind of gave me the confidence to start writing. I taught at IU, and I thought that was a kind of a cool moment. And I took that in, and then I tried to be that for my students. So it was like full circle. That was a long answer to your question.
It was a great answer. Thank you. I'm so excited that you're a writer in every way. Not only are you a writer, but you do it professionally, you teach it. It is part of your life. And I'm excited because I have a hypothesis that in order for us to incorporate these complex, nuanced ideas and to hold these beliefs or concepts and maybe move off those beliefs and concepts, we have to have a way to organize them. And I was also reflecting on the guests that we had, Brittany, and we have had Pamela Paresky and Michael Shermer and Eric Smith and Angel Eduardo. They all are writers. And I'm like, wait a minute, is that a coincidence that these folks that can hold these very complex concepts in their head are also writers? And so
Mhm.
that's my hypothesis. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I don't think that that's a coincidence because I have found over the years, professionally and personally, that writing is more to it than just putting pen to paper. Writing is really, and someone said it perfectly, and if I remembered who it was, I would say it. But writing is basically thinking through your fingers. It's thinking through the pen. And I realized that sometimes especially in undergrad, when I would have, writer's block, so to speak, or when I just couldn't get my ideas out on the page and I felt like I was having writer's fatigue, like maybe I was just writing too much. And really it was the fact that I hadn't logically sensed through the idea first
Mhm.
long enough to be able to communicate it to paper. So I realized that really when I went to NYU, and then that's where I really was, trying to gain that muscle stronger. And then in my professional life, I just realized critical thinking and logical sensing, and then reading a lot of different type of material. When you are able to read different things, your lexicon grows too. So you're better able to express yourself through your prose. The little you read, the little language that you'll have to work with. The more you read, the more words and stuff. So that's why I love to have tangible books when I read, because of course, like, you're reading and you're highlighting the important stuff, but when there's a word that I haven't really seen used in a different way, then I will say, like, why? One, it's striking. Like, I've seen this word before, but because they used it here, it's really a striking way to use it. Or if it's a word I've never heard of, I'll circle it. I will look it up. And I might be like, okay, I might not use this word because that might not be natural for my writing, but I'll find a synonym for it and then see and work with it. So it's really like working with food, like working with ingredients. And the more ingredients you have, the more options you have to make different things. So that's how I see writing. It's thinking, it's reading, and then putting all that to paper.
That makes me think, like, when do you know that what you're writing is important enough to share? Or is there a moment?
Um, my curiosity takes me everywhere. I'll just talk about one of the last things I wrote about for Spin magazine in April, I believe. And it was on this rapper Kid Cudi. And I was really curious because he's a rapper that was around when I was 20 in
Mhm.
2009. And someone that I did find that was really different because he would rap about his feelings, and he would make himself really human. He would basically express himself to his audience and fans that, I might be a rapper, but it doesn't mean like I have a glorious life. It doesn't mean my fame negates my feelings. I deal with depression. I deal with different things. And he would encourage his fans to choose life, even if it's hard to just choose that. But then I was like, okay, this is really interesting that millennials got that when we were 20, 21, and he still has this like Grateful Dead longevity. And I say that because Grateful Dead now, if you hear it, if you're 11, there's a chance you've heard of it, or like a
Yeah.
Michael Jackson, right? And he's kind of gaining that momentum. And with Gen Z, he is very, very, very popular, to where albums that were in 2009, 10, 11 are now back on the Billboard charts. Like, and I'm like, and they're all getting that too. They're like, he saved my life. He made me feel like my life matters and all this stuff. So I was really just curious about that first. Then I was like, Kid Cudi, though, isn't the first musician or artist to express this type of mental health awareness, so to speak. And I was like, how far does this go back? And I was just searching, searching, searching. And then I remembered Beethoven, and how Beethoven you know, one of the best composers ever, suffered from losing his hearing and was going deaf. And that gave him depression. That made him suicidal because he couldn't even hear the sonnets and the symphonies that he was making. But his art and him knowing that he had a purpose and him believing in God, he continued to make this music. And when you look down the line, you see rappers, you see like the Beatles, Jay-Z, that have sampled Beethoven. There's been artists that I have discovered and actors I've discovered that express that Beethoven's music has helped them with their depression. I believe it was Stephen Fry was one of these actors that I heard him say, like, me putting on Beethoven just remind me to keep going, keep going. And I was just thinking, what if Beethoven chose not to stick around? Like all of this impact he made. And then I'm like, and what if Kid Cudi chose not to stick around? All the impact. So I made this essay about Beethoven, about Kid Cudi, about the crisis that's going on with Gen Z and depression and suicide rates going up.
Mhm.
And I tried to make the piece, though, something that would be enjoyable to read, something I would want to read, something that, of course, people are talking about it, but I want to talk about it in a different way. And so when I know that I'm, you could say done, which is subjective, writers decide that, is when I read the piece over and over, and when I feel like it makes sense. Like when I feel like I have communicated it to where I think a majority of audience would understand exactly my point. But if I know deep down, I'm like, you know what, this part, I could work on it. It might take me another week. Like I get it, but I don't think someone will understand what I'm trying to say. I have tried to make it simplified to the point where anyone that doesn't even know Kid Cudi or Beethoven or care will care. So that's when I know I'm done, is when I read it, I understand it, and I'm excited about what I read. And also, you can give it to someone else and they can be your check and balances. But first off, you got to make sure, will people understand this? And is it something that will be enjoyable for them to continue on reading to the end? And when I feel that's right, then I give it to my editor, I pitch it or whatever. And so that's how I do it. And it's a different measurement for whatever subject you're doing. Like with that piece, it might not take as long. But if I'm talking about something like with racial issues, those tend to take me a long time because I know that you could easily turn off someone by one word. And I try to make sure that I'm not excluding an audience. Like I want everyone to be able to get something from it. So writers have to decide on their own when it's done.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to do because you'll over rewrite. And sometimes you have to make yourself be like, no, it won't ever be perfect. So that's what I've learned. It just won't be perfect, but it can be effective. And that's what you want.
Thank you. I've learned a lot. I am not a writer, Brittany, at all. And I think I told you I'm a gabber. So I was thinking when you were talking about how writing's a one way almost. And so you're trying to think you're anticipating what the audience might have questions for. When you said I have to choose my words carefully in these certain circumstances, I was thinking, yes, that happens in conversation too. And you can see the body language and go, uh-oh, don't use that word again, use something different. And I also heard you say the more you read, the wider your spices are, the wider your lexicon is. And so how important that piece is as well in the spoken communication or in written communication. Just keep reading. And I do tactile reading as well. But I guess digital is getting so easy. Sometimes I read that because it's just accessible.
Mm-hmm.
So you were a teacher, and I'm wondering how the writing applied to them. So they're writing students. What level were they?
They were first year
Yeah,
college, so freshmen. Yeah.
I have an 18-year-old starting college next month, so
Oh,
this top of
those
mind for
are,
me.
yeah, those are formative years.
So
But
she's going to come in with a bunch of baggage to her English professor with her good habits and bad habits, right?
they
So,
will.
what is the most important discussion that you had with your students that put them on this trajectory?
So my English class that I taught was titled English 131,
Mm-hmm.
Reading, Writing, and Inquiry. So really, it
Mm.
was kind of like my master's degree, like within like a one-on-one type class format. And I knew that I was dealing with a different demographic, one, because my class wasn't all students coming out of high school. I mean, I
Mm.
had a 40-year-old in that class. I had a couple of 30-year-olds, and I'm 30. I was 32 at the time. So I have people that are older than me in the class, and then, obviously way younger. So I had to make sure that I was, the teaching applied across the line, but also this individual um, type of check and balances I was having with each student and at gauging their level. So my class, which was really cool, that I'm glad I got to do this, but they were like, okay, you get to kind of format and formulate your how you want the class to go. But it has to have a theme. And I chose a theme, and it was just, who are you, and finding your authentic voice.
Mm.
And that was going to allow them to really engage with ideas and things that they love and that they're passionate about. And I'm like, if they're passionate about something, they'll be more willing to really dig deep and think about it, critically think about it. They'll have more endurance to really write long essays about it. I don't want to just give you a subject, because I knew how that was. So I'm
Yeah.
like, all because you're giving someone license to write about something they want doesn't mean they're going to choose something arbitrary. And
Mm.
they were choosing great subjects. I had a student teach about, or teach, well, kind of teach, because she was teaching me some stuff. But she talked about raw milk, and she talked about like things like that, and she had me like ready to start drinking raw milk. I was like, all right, let me start this. But I basically tried to simplify it down. I remember doing an introductory video because I really wanted to simplify the class, and I want to simplify what I'm trying, the goal is. And I really kind of said what I said before in this podcast. I was just like, don't be daunted by how much you're going to write in this class. I understand there's 4 huge essays, so to speak, and there's different writing courses, but this is a chance for you to express what you think. This is a chance for you to express your ideas. And yes, you're going to have to write, and yes, there's going to be edits I'm going to give you, but just know that what you're putting on there is your thoughts, and have patience with yourself. And a lot of them were they were, overwhelmed. But after like a few weeks, I start seeing their confidence. And by the end, and I'm not just saying that because they're my students, although I might be biased, but all of them grew with their writing.
Mm.
But there was some where I was like, they're writers. Like, I saw it, but they completely went for it. I think the light switch came on when they realized that my writing gets better, the better I'm patient with myself, the better I take time to read the chapters, the more that I take time with myself, with my mind,
Mm.
then I'm going to be able to get it out in a more cohesive way versus just writing a bunch of documents that you might not be able to use. So I try to communicate that to my students, and they did well. So I hope they're still doing well. But yeah, they did well, and I really, even though their grades were well, what I was looking forward to was, the student evaluations of the teacher, because I'm like, I did
Mm-hmm.
that all the time. And I
Yeah.
sure enough was honest. And they were honest in good ways. And I was getting teary eyed because one, I was like, okay, this is my first year, but I have to be confident for them, even though
Yeah.
I'm like, I've never done this, but I have a mentor that can help me. And it really challenged me in a way where it just kind of dusted off some of the things about my writing and the way I edit and the way I see words. And yeah, it helped full circle for the students and for myself, which is a big reason why I took on this editing job at the publication, because I, again, have never been an editor, but after doing, teaching at IU, I essentially was an editor for 20 students, reading like 100,000 words a week.
Yeah.
That it was a lot, but it was great, and I'm glad I did it. So
I heard your interview on the Eric White podcast with your mentor, and you mentioned her there, that you had a mentor to fall back on who was your writing professor when you were going through
mhm,
school. And I
mhm,
really loved that whole idea of having your mentor on a podcast, because those folks are some of the most impactful, influential people we'll ever have. And
mhm.
it was a delightful conversation.
Yeah, she's awesome. She's one of the teachers that saw something in me that I didn't see, and
Mm-hmm.
I met her in 2012, so it's been 10 years. And at this point, she's become a friend. Still a hierarchy of mentee and mentor,
Right.
but she's become a friend where we'll just get lunch and we'll just talk about life, or we'll talk about this or that. And she was stern on me, but she was very a loving teacher. But she pushed me in a good way. She's like, I see the potential in you, but you have to fight for it. And that type of advice I gave to my students as well. I understood it was overwhelming for them to write about certain things or to do things they didn't in high school, or if they were just coming back and they're 40 and they're coming back, I understood it, but I said, I'm not going to do anything for you if I allow you to skate by with doing the minimum, when I know doing the maximum, even if it's like you got to stay up all night, it's going to help, because if you can do writing well now, it's going to help you with every class. And I tried to express that to them. I'm like, doing the writing now is just going to help you be a sharper thinker, and that's going to help you with every class. Writing, you're going to have to write for every class. You want to get the foundation here. And you can ask me anything you want, and let's go. And a lot of them took advantage of it, and they did well. So
I love that you said that. I tell our son, who's mechanically minded, all the time that if he can also communicate, he's going to be a different kind of mechanical mind, because he can communicate with people like me that don't understand mechanics, how things work. And that
mhm,
is a huge asset to him, his team, of course, to me, everything.
exactly.
And so, and you're saying that with writing. So, with writing specifically, it's a physical act. So, how does the act of writing influence our thoughts and behaviors? Have you thought about that? And what are your reflections there?
Again, I think it's individualistic for sure.
Hmm.
I just know when I'm in a mode where I know I'm about to dive deep and write and fill up a blank document with words, it's it's me going and entering into isolation,
Yeah.
to be honest. Um, I will, it doesn't matter. I will sit in a room and my office or whatever, and I will write, but I will think long and hard before I start writing. And when something comes to my mind, I'll write. And what I've learned is, you know, writing is not linear, at least not for me. Now, it's not something where I just like, I write a lead, a nut graph, the body, the kicker. boom, and then I'll edit things in just to make it, transition cohesive. For me, the first thing I might write is the kicker or the end. Like I might be like, this might be actually a good thing to maybe put at the end. I'm like, okay, this is a good for the lead or the beginning of it to really entice people. And then the body of it might be coming out. And then when I have recognized is like, even if I write the whole body out, it's almost like puzzle pieces. Some things might not fit there, might fit here. And this was happening a lot with the Kid Cudi thing. I actually had it where I kind of started with Beethoven and then went to Kid Cudi. And then I realized like, no, I can kind of go Kid Cudi, Beethoven. So I kept everything, but I kind of was, in a sense, you got to be fearless with your writing to just allow yourself to just go with your gut feeling, because you can always go back, but you kind of have to allow yourself not to think that you got to fit these rules into how you write. Okay, so I actually forgot your question
Oh,
because
no,
I
that's
veered
fine.
off.
You said it's writing's not linear, and
Yeah.
so I'm stuck there. So tell me more about that. Do you do a brain dump sometimes? Do you just concentrate on one piece and I'll research the rest later? How's that work?
I try to that actually is a good question because it varies. If it's
Mhm.
something that's a shorter piece that I'm like, I kind of know this subject, but I need to do more research, I'll do the research and get it all and do the notes and get it all and then have it on my computer. And I usually am in front of a computer where it's one screen and this, and I might have notes, and I look at that as again like puzzle pieces. Like I might start writing, then I might look, I'm like, oh yeah, I need to put this part in. I need to quote this. I need to bring in this author, this book, or whatever it is, this information. But if it's something that's more theoretical,
Mhm.
like if it's like a reporting piece, that's different. If it's something that I'm exploring an idea that I think I'm going to get to the bottom to,
Yeah.
I kind of let myself say it, and then I'll read it, and then I might be like, okay, this actually is getting me somewhere, but I don't need any. I like half of this can go. So one thing that I do make sure of is not to overwrite, but to overthink, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like to really vet and vet and vet and then write. Because what I would do before in my undergrad would be writing, 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 and then try to make sense of what I wrote. And then that's just putting you in the box of what you wrote.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you need to make sense of it all here and then try to put it concisely on the paper. And then you can always add if you need to conceptualize. But to overwhelm yourself with a bunch of documents and you're like, I have nowhere else to start. It's literally putting your unvetted thoughts onto paper and looking at it versus just let it vet out. Be patient. And I will talk to myself.
Mhm.
This is why I need to be in isolation because it probably nuts. But I will talk it out and
Uh-huh.
say it to see if I can communicate it within a paragraph or see if I can communicate within a couple of minutes. And then I'm like, okay, I got that. So, and I might have a recorder on just in case if I need it, if I don't want to transcribe it. Um, so it's it's just very individualistic. It's
Mhm.
hard to explain how someone does it. You do it and you allow yourself not to be constrained by it. And that's when you know you're a writer because it is weird like knowing that you love something but it's also something that is like can be so overwhelming. And it's like I always kid around and say like writers are masochists because it's like it's going to hurt like in the
Oh,
beginning, but it's like going to the gym. You're like, I don't want to go. You know you need to go. I don't want to go, but once you just start walking, you're like, I'm so glad I came. And that's writing is kind of like that. I I love it so much, but sometimes when you're in it and that idea is like perfectly in your mind, and for some reason you cannot express it on the paper, I'm like, okay, maybe it's not as thoroughly like laid out. Maybe I really need to sit with this more. Also, I realize some ideas might not be ready,
Yeah.
or some ideas just aren't good. Maybe the thing that you're thinking of really isn't anything. And
Yeah.
that's why you're having such trouble putting it out. And then you try to make it into something, and then you're just like, yeah, this is whack. That's happened before. I have some of those documents as whatever. But yeah, I hope that answered your question. I go on tangents
Absolutely.
so bad.
No, I really appreciate the deep dive of how you think through the act of writing. That I feel like I just got a secret door into your brilliance. I've had a lot of bad ideas, and it's hard to go, oh, that's actually a bad idea until you tell a friend and they go, no, it's a bad idea.
Yeah. You're like, oh, okay. We're no
You're like,
longer
no,
friends. Okay.
no, that's not working. Um, yeah, that's interesting because I feel as if this is if I ask 10 writers how they write, they might give me 10 different answers, but maybe not. I haven't asked 9 other writers. And I feel as if there's like a minimum, Brittany. So let's just say we're not a writer, we're like me, but I want to be able to have more cohesion. I want to be sharper. I want all the good things that writing makes a person. I want to communicate more clearly. So, is there like a gym minimum? Like, do I need to do cardio 3 times a week, or what is that? Did you tell your students? And what is your opinion there?
Well, the cardio is reading.
Okay.
The cardio is exercising your mind with different people's minds.
Mm,
And not only just sticking to things that, of course, you want to read things that interest you, but just coming out of your comfort zone.
yeah.
Like if you're always someone that reads sci-fi, try reading, something nonfiction about maybe a musician you like, or it's just something you're kind of curious about that you wanna learn about. I would say if I had to say two things that I think across the board writers have realized. Patience literally is a virtue, like with writing. Because sometimes we feel like we have to be quick. We feel almost if we don't are able to express it or write a lot per day, we're not a writer anymore. Like we don't have anything to give. We have used up all the language, all the words we've known. We'll never write a piece, and we act all like dramatic, like we're in Shakespeare play. But like patience is key, and also for me, and I would say this for all writers, because if you are a writer and you've been published, you've definitely worked with editors.
Mhm.
So something I have realized, and as an editor now, like editing professional writers' work, is a different ball game when you're editing first year college students versus like professional writers that
Yeah.
you like loved and you've read before, and now you're telling them maybe you shouldn't use this word, and you're like, how dare I say this to them? But um not thinking you know everything,
Mhm.
like not thinking that everything you just put on that page is gold, like realizing that if an editor says to you that, okay, you don't need this paragraph, you can actually simplify it to a sentence. Okay, this actually is confusing. Okay, maybe not use this word because of this. Of course, you have that knee-jerk reaction to kind of fight them on it. I've done it, but in a good way, like, not like, And sometimes they can see your point and they're like, you know what, we can just leave that. It's fine. But other times, if they are pressing you to really take their advice and don't think that you're always right, and don't think that your writing, everything has to stay. I think that's the best thing I've done for myself, to not be so married to it. Because when you write it and you think it's a great paragraph, or you think it's a great page or even a chapter, you're like, it all has to stay. I took too much time for this. And that's why patience is a virtue with it. It's like, you know what? Maybe you need more time to really get it out, to really be succinct. And at NYU, I was able to be accepted in this course where 10 other students was accepted in. And it was a writer's workshop by Ta-Nehisi Coates. And one thing that he did, that, cliche as it might sound, that changed my life with writing, was he really humanized the process. He really talked about patience, and he really talked about how, again, that sometimes you do have to start over. With the book Between the World and Me, he said he wrote that book and they had to redo it. He had to redo the entire thing.
Oh.
Because his editor said, well, I won't say what he said, but basically that he had to write pretty much all over again. And then when he wrote that, he had to write a whole chapter again. And he said it's a grueling process, but that's why you have to allow yourself patience. And also, you have to be kind with yourself too, and not think that, oh, because I'm rewriting, that doesn't mean that I should pick another profession. It just means that you're just not there yet. That's what it means. So for me, I think patience and knowing that everything on the page isn't gold and can be taken off the page. And you have to, and that actually humbles you to the craft, to know that you're not the first person to do this. And what I mean by that is, there's a lot of writers that it's almost like they try to write in a way where some people won't get it. Like they use $10 words to be elitist, to be highbrow, because they almost want to exclude people, because they're like, well, my piece is, if you don't understand, it's because you're not, here with it.
Right.
But people that I really love, who you could say were highbrow, even though they wouldn't say it, like James Baldwin, for instance, Toni Morrison, they were the greatest writers to me of all time. Not just because of how they wrote, but because I knew that they were being sincere and they wanted everyone they were trying to meet people where they were. They could easily write like Shakespeare, Mark Twain, whatever. They could easily write like that. And of course, they use words that maybe you have to look up in a dictionary. But I could tell when they were taking time to comb through something, because they were like, this, I need everyone to get. Like, and I'm not trying to put up a barrier for people that might only have a PhD to be able to get the sentence. Like, I want someone that grabs off the shelf to read it and be inspired. And those are the type of writers that I am inspired by, and that's what I try to do. Not to say I'm not highbrow or whatever that is, but I try to make sure that what I'm writing is on whatever level that person is.
Yeah. Accessible.
And accessible, yes.
So I'm wondering, you mentioned James Baldwin and Toni Morrison and how they were accessible. I'm using that word. One could argue they're true masters because they had the tools to address any audience that they wanted to, but they addressed the greatest number. And sometimes I think a lot about sports because I'm an athlete, former Army athlete actually. And I think a lot about sports. And when the Masters, when the Olympians go out, it looks so easy to us.
Exactly.
And, Simone Biles and Shaun White make it look like, oh, I could go out there and do, 360s off the floor and
Yeah.
and off
Yeah.
the half pipe. And you get out there and you can't even stand up.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't even stand on one foot. And that's when you're in the presence of a true master, I feel like.
100%.
Yeah.
That's how I looked at like Michael Jackson. I'm like, I can do the
Mm.
moonwalk. Not hard. But yeah, because they practice at it, right? Like they
Mm.
really loved it enough to really practice to where when someone practices something over and over and over, dives in it over and over and over, like breathes it, eats it, then when you see it, you think you can do it, it's attainable, and you're inspired, like I can
Mm.
do that. And that's what Toni Morrison, and I've said this a lot in other interviews, Toni Morrison's book, The Bluest Eye,
Mm.
when I read that, and I was either 18 or 19, that's when I really was like, I want to be a writer. I want to do what she does with words. I want to be able to inspire people like that, because she was able to take a topic of colorism that I felt I was dealing with as a child, right? And something that I didn't even know other people really dealt with. And she was able to put that into a story, in a fictional story, and really communicated to me something with language and words. And I felt like this is life changing. And I can really understand now the power words have.
Mm.
And that's when I really wanted to write. I was like, the journals that I do at home, the journals that I have under my bed, that I feel inspiring to myself, I want to, maybe I can do that to someone else. Maybe I can make someone who also wants to be a writer feel like I can do that too. And I think that's what, hopefully, what the ripple effect of what writers do who really wanted to inspire is just inspire more people to write who really feel it in their gut that they want to do it. Sometimes it really takes someone to tell them like, hey, I I'm humble to this craft, and if I can do it, you can do it. But it takes work. So that's the thing.
Yep.
It's not where, I've had friends who might start a blog or something, and they're like, I stopped that. It was hard. I hate writing. I hate writing. And I'm like, ouch. Like, you're talking about my friend. Like, writing is my best friend.
Yeah.
But yeah, you'll know when you want to be a writer when you just can't not put down the pen, where you're like, I have to get this out. I have to be able to express this way. Like, even things with YouTube, I might say it there, but I might need to still write it more thoroughly in an essay. There's just certain things that I can't say out loud only. I have to be able to write it. And that's my best vehicle of expressing myself in anything I've done is writing. So,
Well, I really enjoy your podcast as well. I think you do a great job there. And I love your articles. I've been reading your articles. I really liked your letter to your niece, and it touched me very much.
yeah, that was I cried on that one too.
Mm.
But I'm glad that you enjoyed that. That one was
Yes.
a very vulnerable piece for sure.
I'm attracted to that, and I appreciate that because I think a lot of us are feeling very vulnerable right now. And I remember when I was 19 or 20, I had a very vulnerable secret inside, and I would not show anybody. And I remember meeting someone 5 years later, and she's like, "Oh, I remember you from class. You were the girl that nothing could touch. You were like had the world by the tail." And I was like, wow. I had such good armor. I was like crushed inside. You have no idea.
Oh.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a lot of us have this armor on because, so many things. And I worry a lot about Gen Z. And I'm glad you mentioned it earlier because they are inundated with information that may or may not be helpful and in service to them. A lot of it isn't in service to them. And they intake it. And then what do they do with that? Do they stuff it? Do they let it out in anger? Do they capture it and make it a thought and into a concept? I mean, there's so many different ways, and writing seems like one constructive, productive, artistic way to deal with all that input.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, writing is almost the antithesis of our culture right now. Because with Gen Z, and I'm sure there's a ton of Gen Zs that love to read and write, but I will say, like, TikTok is their playground. Instagram is their playground. And millennials, yes, but Gen Z is what their wheelhouse.
Yeah.
And TikTok is just very quick, 6 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever. And it's almost like that's their way of consolidating a thought or expression or an idea and getting it out. But you can't get it out in 30 seconds. Like you can, but that's not it. Like that shouldn't be the finished product. And also with that comes this feeling of wanting to be known and vindicated. Like I understand. I agree with you. Like there's this vulnerability problem, but it's almost like it's like it's being called on its bluff though, because everything has spiked. Like the amount of Gen Zs who suffer with depression and anxiety and suicide, and seeing people that are young who are reaching in like instant fame, who get it and just have decided to kill themselves.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I'm using words I shouldn't. Delete themselves. And like it's like they're not being fulfilled because they're getting all of this information. Anything that anyone wants to know right now, they can get. Anything anyone wants to see, they can see.
Yeah.
And stuff that they don't ever want to see is in front of them.
Right.
And with social media, it's making people it's putting more importance on their online personas than who they are in reality. And it's making people uncomfortable just being with themselves, uncomfortable with who they are. But online, they can be more comfortable because they're putting on something that's maybe not who they really are. And sometimes with writing, thinking could be the scariest part to someone's day. Sitting with yourself and your ideas and what you believe can be scary. And I know that I've heard somewhere that the love of books and reading has declined as well, which that isn't surprising. Because why read if you could listen to a podcast? Why read a book if you could watch YouTube? Not to say that these things you shouldn't do, but I know there's a lot of writers, and I will say I am one, who, yes, I will write a piece and it'll be published, but I might actually read that piece on a YouTube video because I'm like, some people are just never going to read this.
Yeah.
And that might be where we are going, but there's nothing like reading something. Again, I have not answered that question that you asked. So
It's totally fine, Brittany.
I went onto social media. I was about to go into a sermon. It's not Sunday.
We went where we went, and I love it.
Okay, good.
So Tell me more about the project you're working on now, what you can tell us about, and then if you will give us a peek into the future, like what subject or topic are you thinking about writing about next?
So right now, there's a couple of things. I'm actually, while we're talking about YouTube and American Shade,
Sure.
I'm seeing that taking a different direction, but not completely. So I don't want to freak anyone out that might be a fan, but a different direction, a different name. So that's something I'm still sitting with.
Mm-hmm.
I've been sitting with for about a month, so we'll see where that goes. But with what I'm doing now with this publication, it actually happened in a way where everything kind of aligns. I met this man named Roger Kerr in 2020, December 2020. I was on his podcast, and his podcast in this platform that he has created 10 years ago called Nuance Forum. And on this particular podcast, there's like a Rolodex of like 15 to 20 panelists that will come on and talk with a writer, an author, whoever they have, I guess. So on this podcast, there was 8 people, including Rod, and this was the longest podcast I was on, but I didn't even realize it was like a 3-hour conversation with 8 people, and we were talking mainly about race issues and race reconciliation and progression versus perfection. And I was saying things there because I was writing on an essay and I was thinking out loud with them, and like it was like this thinking tank, and I was expressing things there in such a free way to where I'm like, I would have kept this in my notes. I would have never said this out loud, but I was able to bounce it back and forth to where I felt like the needle really was pushed with certain things that I was like, this makes sense on why this might be this way or this way. And we then gained a friendship and rapport over the course of 2 years. And then before I took the job with IU, he asked if I would come on and be an editor of a publication he wanted to start. And so at that point, I couldn't do it. But he said, okay, after you're done, if you still want to do this, let me know. And I did. So February, we came together, brainstormed. So the publication is called Yellow Seeds. And it's a name that he allowed me to be kind of creative with. And the backstory to why it's called Yellow Seeds is tied down to my Christian faith. It's not a Christian publication, but when I look around culture and I'm in these different conversations with just people in my life or with public intellects or thinkers, everyone who has a different idea or a belief, like even if they're not 100% sure, there's a mustard seed of faith about why they believe the thing. And I realized as I'm talking to people, I have this passion in me about this thing that I am correct, but they have that same thing that they're correct. So I wanted to call it Yellow Seeds because we want to position this publication to truly be a place where diverse perspectives are amplified, but not in a way where it's a partisan platform. It's a nonpartisan platform. It's a platform where we don't really have argumentative prose, so to speak, but people that are literally trying to get at the why of something and really trying to get at why this is this way. And it's not necessarily a politically staunched idea. It's just, why do we all think this way about this thing? And I can say the names. So we have, because it'll be out maybe. So our first piece is going to be Chloe Valdalery, and she's going to be writing about nuance. And our second piece is by Eric Maxwell Shapiro. He's a journalist, he's a writer, and he's going to be, his essay is called Why Are We Afraid of Clowns? And clowns is synonymous with comedians. And he wrote this during the time of when Dave Chappelle was getting attacked on stage and when Will Smith, the Oscar slap. But he doesn't just stay there because obviously there's a binary there. There's people that was on Will's side, Chris's side. There's people that doesn't like Dave, likes Dave. So those are jumping off points, but he goes like deep into history about why comedians are important, why jesters are important, and also why the critics are important as well. And with that, we wanted to do something also different. We didn't just want to let the essay live on the publication and be like, thank you for writing for us. Bye.
Yeah.
What we do is we have your piece, but then we do like a 45-minute to an hour conversation with you about your piece. Eventually, these will be live, hopefully, where people that have read the piece then can see this live and they can like type in questions and ask the author, face to face about something maybe in the piece that the author can say in real time. Because usually what happens with publications, which this isn't anything that's bad. I mean, this is almost every publication, but people come on and write a comment. Maybe let's just say the New York Times, they'll write comments and the author's not in the comments engaging. It's just like for you to kind of express.
Yeah.
So this is like bringing that comment section to life, if you will, where you just read the piece and now you get to see them talk about it and you can engage with them or you can just watch. So we have those two so far. And we didn't want to overwhelm, have 10 people. We kind of want everyone to kind of have their spotlight. And that hopefully will be out around the time this is. So look out for that. And we're excited about it. So yeah.
You edited Chloe Valdry?
I know, right? I did. But she was awesome because I believe we're the same age. So, and I was on her podcast a couple months ago with Camille Foster and Coleman Hughes. So we've all talked and have this cool rapport, she and I. And so I didn't feel too weird editing, but it still was she's a professional writer. Again, it's not like I have to put a bunch of red lines or stuff because it's like chef's kiss already. But there was certain things where I would be like, maybe we can take this out or move this here or move this there. And she was like, oh, yeah. And then, of course, there's, stylistic differences. And then we worked out. That's just editing and writer stuff. But her piece is amazing. Eric's piece is amazing. And I can't wait for people to read it and listen to them because people know them already. But it's just nice to read pieces that is okay, the weapons are down. There's no political torches here. We're just trying to understand this thing. And now we're in a conversation and hopefully we can all talk about it when we do this live talk and you can get on it. So that's what this publication is. And I'm excited about it. So
you made me very excited about it. I love that live engagement, those questions, instead of just screaming out into the void. You're talking to a real person. You're talking to the person that's thought deeply about this subject that you're asking about, if you so choose. And that is very, very cool. Cool use of technology and what we have going on here in a modern world. Where can our listeners find more about your projects, what's coming up, and all that good stuff?
Well, if you follow my Twitter,
yes,
I love to express myself there. So my Twitter handle is King Talissa, and Talissa spelled Talissa. And I post as much as I can about YouTube, about what I write. Instagram as well, Brittany Talissa King, and my handle is b.Talissa there. And usually if you just Google, I hate saying Google my name, but my pieces will pop up.
Yep.
I also have a Medium page. I'm a featured writer on there, so if you want to check me out there, I post things. And also about Medium, what I like to do is sometimes, for the Kid Cudi piece or another piece I wrote for even the Daily Beast, the editor has to edit it down because they have a word count. That's fine, but then I'll put up the entire piece, the original piece, on my Medium page, so people can read that, and then you can read other thoughts that didn't make that piece. So yeah, so you can all that. And then Yellow Seeds, just stick around Twitter. There will be like an announcement of that. And so, yes.
Well, we're lucky to get front row seats to that. Thank you
You're
so
the
much.
first breaking news right here on Unity.
I feel very Anchorage, like an
Yes.
anchor.
Yes.
Is there anything left unsaid that you would like to cover with our audience, or any questions you have, or any last lingering thoughts?
Another hour? I would say there's so much. I would say, as we are so polarized, Kimberly, and divided, and I learned this so much more and more and more, like, because no one will ever be perfect at this game of understanding. You just hope that you get better over time.
Yeah.
But you have to just, if we really want to see unity now, or progression in a realistic way, there has to be a willing of sacrifice on everyone's end to meet people in the middle. You can't just hope that everyone that you talk to gives up what they believe or gives up their stance and believes what you think because you think you're correct, because who knows if you are. So for us to have a realistic type of progression, we have to be willing to really kind of sacrifice some things, or just realize that not everyone, and it's so cliche, but not everyone has to believe in what you believe or the way you believe in order to be a decent human being to someone. Because humanity, we're all flawed. No one's perfect. No one's above approach. No one's above critique. And if everyone just gives a little bit of grace and know that how you feel so passionate about the thing you believe is exactly how someone else does, if you just see it like that, then you can hopefully give the same grace you hope that someone would give you too. So that just went on to like a Martin Luther King vibe, but that's what I would say. Because we have this polarization because we just want everyone just go on one side. The Democrats want everyone to be a Democrat, Republican, and that's literally never going to happen. We're all going to have to live together and work together, and perhaps the way that we think is a positive thing. Perhaps the fact that there are people that are more liberal than others, more conservative than others, actually is something that we can work with and not against. Because wouldn't it be boring if everyone was liberal or everyone was conservative? It would be such a boring world. So maybe actually the friction could be less of headbutting and more like spark fire. That can be a positive impact for all of us. That's what I would say.
Well,
You
you're
can edit that the
sparking
way
a
you
lot of
want.
fires on the internet, on in written word. You're sparking a lot of conversation, a lot of good thoughts, and I appreciate you bringing the tool of writing to our listeners. Like, this is one way, a really good way, a proven way that you can think about things out loud and then put it on paper and become a more logical, sense-making person, so you can communicate more clearly with those that you disagree with.
Exactly. And that's what I would say. Read more. Read more, and read various things too. Expand your horizon. There is no harm in reading other people's work and ideas that you might not agree with. That's something I do. That really exercises your mind a lot. But sometimes you realize that there's some common ground in there. And then with that, when you encounter someone that has that type of thinking as well, then you're better equipped and patient, and you have this empathy muscle to exercise because you did it with your mind first. And now you can do it with your words.
Thank you, Brittany.
You're welcome.
Appreciate you
Thank you.
on our show today.
Thank you.
And
I had fun.
for our listeners, stay tuned for our next episode of Unity Now podcast. Thank you.
Thanks.
And that is